That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Volume 12. Prologue. The Jester's Escape. Yuki Kagurazuka is a genius. Even back in his original world, Yuki had a special power, a sort of supernatural observational force, one you could call psychokinesis. He was born with this power, but he never felt any urgent need to do something with it. After all, he knew if he told someone about this power of his, he'd be made into a spectacle. Life was thus rather humdrum for him, but he enjoyed it well enough. His parents were kind to him, and he had a decent number of friends. He never found it hard to scare up some money when needed, so he had access to basically anything he wanted. He had absolutely no complaints. But one day, Yuki was befallen by sudden misfortune. Right when he entered middle school, his parents passed away in an accident. It wasn't their fault. Their car was hit head-on by a truck driver who fell asleep behind the wheel, and they died instantly. Only Yuki, sleeping in the back seat, survived. He thought it was unfair, of course. He hated the driver who caused the accident, but there was nothing he could do about it. Japan was a nation of laws and regulations, and personal revenge wasn't part of that picture. The ensuing court case revealed a number of things. The transportation company the truck driver worked for had bitten off more than it could chew. They put the brunt of that on their field employees, who toiled on even though they knew they were overworked. The driver, too, was a victim here. So was it the transportation company's fault? Well, the facts didn't paint a clear picture there, either. If they turned down a job from a big firm, they might not have gotten another order from them again. It wasn't easy to say no to a long-time client. The transportation company should have responded by improving their business structure, but skilled drivers were tough to come by, and they didn't have the financial wherewithal to bring on and train younger talent. That's so messed up, Yuki lamented. The world was just so unfair, and he was just so powerless. Who should he hate for it? To be honest, society itself had serious problems. Yuki considered exacting his revenge on society, but that was beyond his own capabilities. As a genius, he thus knew his own limits. The world had advanced to completion, in essence. Supernatural powers or not, having a little strength on your side didn't mean you could change anything by yourself. You weren't gonna beat an army, and even if you could, there was no future awaiting you past that. Yuki thought about giving in to despair, destroying all of society, and rebuilding it from scratch, but that had caused nothing but misery for vast numbers of people, and he just couldn't commit to that. If Yuki wanted to change society, the only way was to pound the pavement and attract more people who shared his beliefs. He could then become a politician and improve his nation in his own image. That was the only plan Yuki came up with. A long, patient path, one that was possible if he really put his mind to it, but it'd only bear fruit decades into the future. Yuki was at an impasse, and before he made his decision, he wound up traveling between worlds. But whether this was a stroke of fortune or misfortune for him was another question entirely. It was the sheer malice of the demon lord Kazalim that brought Yuki to this world. Kazalim had lost his physical body, retaining possession of just his spiritual one, but he still hadn't lost his powers as the Curse Lord. He was biding his time, making the necessary preparations to resurrect himself, and he'd execute his plan only when he summoned a body suitable for his spirit. Of course, he carefully examined the constraints he'd put on this summoned target. Failure was absolutely out of the question for this ritual, so he'd use his powers of domination to carve a cursed seal before the summoning. The summoned target's heart and mind would be crushed. Completely unaware of what happened, Kazalim would then seize the power within their soul, snatching away the body and resurrecting himself. Kazalim's sole mistake was summoning Yuki for this ritual. None of the curse-driven magic the demon lord tried on him worked. With his genius-level talents, Yuki quickly surmised how this world operated. In the midst of the journey, he obtained all the powers he wanted, the powers to change the world. It was pure, unadulterated energy, a power from the soul that he could alter to his liking. The name of it, the unique skill initiator. He had told Raimuru that he lacked any special skills, but that was a bold-faced lie. The first thing he initiated with this power was anti-skill, the ability to cancel out anything hostile coming his way. That immediately foiled Kazalim's scheme. Not only was Kazalim defeated, but he even had to capitulate to Yuki. Now Yuki found meaning to life in this world. Here, it was eat or be eaten. The laws governing civilization were still incomplete, and it would be a while until they even approached perfection. Therefore, it was left to him to become this world's leader, and guide it in the right direction. Yuki had decided to tackle this unfair world head-on. It was a challenge that drove him forward. This world was his for the taking. Yuki had escaped the chaotic scene at the cathedral with his 3 servants, Laplace, Footman, and Tyr. The group promptly tried to flee the Holy Empire of Lubelius. They considered staying nearby and gauging the situation, but ultimately decided that remaining there was too dangerous. The berserk hero Chronoa wasn't the kind of pushover Yuki could control. She was a fearsome figure, one who saw any living, breathing being in sight as her enemy. Granville must have known that when he offered to fight alongside Yuki. He hated to admit it, but this time, his enemy had the upper hand. What a travesty, though, hey? We finally gave the demon lord Luminous the slip. We were one step away from nabbing a hero, the greatest weapon anyone could hope for, and now look, Laplace lamented. Ho ho ho, Footman chortled. Her strength was nothing I've seen in this dimension. It is a pity we couldn't bring her to our side, but against her, everybody there would have been killed, no? That was the logical conclusion, but Yuki wasn't sure things would go that easily. Yeah, who knows? 'Cause in the end, the demon lord Raimuru's a freak of nature, huh? And Luminous and Leon were on site, too, so we're talking 3 demon lords and a small army of decent magic-born. No matter who won, it sure wouldn't surprise me, Laplace replied. Precisely, said Tyr. Granville is a former hero himself, so he's quite strong, too. I can't even fathom who would come out on top. Laplace and Tyr weren't as optimistic as Footman. Like Yuki, they were also contemplating a possible victory for Raimuru's side. Certainly, for Yuki's purposes, Chronoa annihilating everybody on the scene would be the best way to end the day. That'd rub out Raimuru, a tremendous nuisance, Granville, a pain in the ass, Luminous, a likely future threat to him, and even Leon, the nemesis of Laplace and his cohorts. With all of them gone, the West was as good as under Yuki's control, and while Chronoa would still be a handful, she wasn't that scary to him if she lacked any sentience. For all he cared, they could just bait her with some monsters and banish her to the other side of the desert or something. If an adversary was all strength and nothing else, Yuki wouldn't even see it as a threat. That was why he hoped, at least, to find out who survived, but no, we were right to run. If we got involved, I don't think any of us would have come out unscathed. And besides, his instincts told him something bad was about to happen. They needed to figure out their position in this free-for-all, if only so they could form a strategy, but Yuki trusted his instincts and chose to flee anyway. If Chronoa was defeated, the surviving demon lords would no doubt be openly hostile to him. Raimuru had probably noticed Yuki's betrayal by this point. He couldn't talk his way out of that any longer. With this defeat, they had lost their base of operations, their position, and everything else in the West, and all, Yuki thought, because he was foolish enough to fall for Granville's offers. He was thus willing to accept this result as his just deserts. That was why, when it was time to flee, he didn't hesitate for a moment. This firm decision-making acumen was one of his greatest assets, and it had seen him through some difficult spots time and time again. Yuki assumed this would be another one of those times. But he soon came to realize how sorely mistaken he was. Suddenly, as Yuki's group quickly traversed the landscape, a single man stood before them, blocking their path. Next to him was a blue-haired girl whose beauty immediately drew your attention, wearing a dark red-made outfit that looked extremely out of place. Who are you? Yuki froze, sensing the danger. The man ignored Laplace's question, his eyes transfixed on Yuki. Nobody else mattered to him. Ho ho ho. If you mean to get in our way. Footman took a step forward, ready to eliminate this duo. The next moment, he was sent crashing to the ground by a new figure, another girl, wearing the same dark red-made outfit as the blue-haired one. This girl's hair was green. She was none other than Misery, who had been on assignment in Inglesia until a few moments ago. The appearance of Testarossa put an end to that mission, and so she flew over. And with Misery here, the blue-haired figure must have been Rain. The two of them served only one man, the demon lord Guy Crimson, Lord of Darkness and the most powerful being in the world. His rouge hair, darker than blood, fluttered in the breeze, his crimson eyes twinkling like gems as he beheld Yuki. "Hey! The first time we've met, I think. You've been attracting my interest." Guy's gaze was frozen upon Yuki. No one else was permitted to enter his sight. Yuki, detecting this, wasn't sure whether to feel happy or sad about that. Given the way Misery just dispatched Footman, he had a decent idea of his foe's powers. And not just that, the colors of their hair, and the unusual made uniforms, matched those of a curious group Kigali, Kazalim, and Clayman had all told him about. This man before him stood at the very peak of the world, a peak he wanted for himself. If he had the ambition to conquer the world, Yuki would have to face him sooner or later. "Ah, so you're Guy Crimson, hailed as the most powerful of the demon lords? It's an honor to meet you. My name is Yuki Kagurazuka. To think that you'd come to me, did you want to join forces?" Yuki grinned at Guy, never letting himself be overpowered. This was, he knew, very wishful thinking. One of Guy's maids had just knocked Footman to the ground. There was no way they came here to extend an olive branch. He knew that, but he still put up a friendly facade. That was how he negotiated, making an outrageous statement or proposal and gauging the other side's circumstances and goals from their reaction. "Ah ha ha ha. You're funny. That's quite an attitude to take in front of me. And maybe that wouldn't be such a bad offer, but it looks like you and Leon are enemies, eh? And besides, aren't you traveling to the east now? Because personally, I ain't a fan of Ludora gaining any more war power." Negotiations were off the table. Yuki didn't expect Guy would take the offer from the start. It didn't faze him. He was too busy scrutinizing whatever information he could glean from Guy's words. Ludora was the emperor of the Nazca Namrium Ulmaria United Eastern Empire. Guy's name dropping him meant the two had a relationship, and most likely not a friendly one. "So they want to eliminate us before we can reach the east? I really don't want to tangle with the strongest demon lord here, but if this is what it's come to, so be it." There was no avoiding a battle with Guy. Escape was futile. Silly little tricks were meaningless in this situation. Going after Guy with everything they had, Yuki decided, offered them better chances. Well, all right. If you're opposed to us, that serves me just fine as well. This way, I can test out the powers of the strongest of demon lords before I come to the east." Yuki meant to antagonize Guy. At the same time, a great excitement welled within his heart until it spilled out and coursed through his entire body. Right then, at that moment, he had decided to take the powers he had bottled up and unleash them all against the strongest demon lord. Defeat, he thought as he sized Guy up, wasn't even imaginable to him. Yuki was certainly confident. In fact, in a one-on-one match, he was sure he could beat anyone. He could tell Chronoa was a pretty dangerous foe, but nothing more. With a concerted effort, he could win, if only after a struggle, but they were sharing a venue with multiple demon lords who were clearly not on his side. Leon, Luminous, even the incredibly soft-hearted Rimuru, had likely noticed Yuki's true intentions. Rimuru had realized some time ago that Yuki was his enemy, but that actually benefited Yuki back at the cathedral. Had he tried using Rimuru to his advantage, Yuki would have fallen into a trap. Yuki didn't know that at the time, but either way, he had the right idea about Rimuru now. Yet with all his confidence, not even Yuki was stupidly bold enough to take on 3 demon lords and Chronoa simultaneously. He didn't need his instincts to tell him that retreating was the best option. Now, though, this was different. The man standing in front of him was all the warning he needed, and once he realized that, Yuki resolved to handle matters with everything he had. Guy flashed a bemused smile. "Oh, you think you can beat me? Well, kind of. I was planning to knock you out sooner or later anyway, so this is just accelerating the timetable a bit." Yuki's attitude quickly stoked the murderous ire of Rain and Misery, but they'd never opened their mouths without their master Guy's permission. The Demon Lord was the absolute ruler, and any concern for his safety was therefore a sign of disrespect. Guy was a capricious Demon Lord, merciless to anyone he deemed not worth his time. Rain and Misery just barely earned that acceptance for themselves, but get on his bad side, and they'd be killed in an instant, no doubt. That was the clear difference in power between Guy and his maids. Laplace couldn't move, he was like a frog transfixed by a venomous snake. If he tried to assist Footman, Rain would certainly retaliate. It was 4 against 3, numerically speaking, but the yawning gap in strength was extremely cold comfort to him. He might be able to take on Rain and Misery alone, but with Guy around, he didn't stand a chance. Yuki seemed ready to take on Guy, but Laplace saw that as a foolhardy challenge. Forget it. Anyone but this dude. Chronoa was on another dimension herself, but this guy crimsons across my heart monster, I tell ya. This ain't even gonna be a fight. We can't run, and who knows how long the boss can hold out? I suppose that's gonna be the key to survival here. Laplace deserved praise for identifying even a small slice of Guy's potential force. But beyond that, his strength of heart, the ability to consider fleeing instead of collapsing to the ground heartbroken, demonstrated his true worth. He knew about Yuki's strength, but Yuki was hiding exactly how much he had from them. Would it even work against Guy? Still, even if Yuki was no match for Guy, Laplace intended to rescue Footman, take Tyr, and get out of there. Yuki would no doubt pick up on this and give him a hand, that's how much Laplace trusted him. The only problem with this plan was that Rain and Misery were abnormally strong menaces themselves. They weren't careless enough to give Laplace an opening to save Footman, he hesitated to make any untoward moves against them. He wanted to find a way to rescue his friend, but the problem, it turned out, had a ready solution. "Hey! Let him go." The order came from Guy to Misery, who, of course, offered no resistance, immediately releasing Footman. Well, that was easy. Now I guess we got an escape route after all. Laplace was almost beginning to feel optimistic about his chances when things took a different turn. "Don't worry, if you beat me, I'll let you all go unhurt." Guy seemed to be contradicting himself. What did defeating him have to do with letting Yuki's group leave? It was hardly reassuring at all. Thus, distressed and depressed, Laplace decided to just watch the proceedings, praying for Yuki to win. Yuki was the first to act. His supreme confidence, driven by the firm belief that no magic or skills worked on him, led him to unleash a kick on Guy. It was a sharp, heavy kick that seemed to shift halfway, its trajectory veering in midair before finally landing hard on Guy's head. But it was Yuki's face that wound up wincing. "Eesh. You're so solid." His anti-skill worked against all things, penetrating the defenses of any foe, but despite being directly attacked, Guy stood there, totally serene and not demonstrating an ounce of pain. There was no trick or trap involved. It was just that Guy's body was more solid than diamond itself, and the mix of toughness and flexibility was a truly ominous threat. That's just how Guy was. That barely triggered an itch. Some battle this is. Humor me a little more, would you? 'Cause otherwise I'm killing all of you. With a smile, Guy conjured flames in his right hand. It was the elemental magic napalm burst, a searing fire reminiscent of a dragon's long, twisting form. At a temperature of several thousand degrees, it could instantly vaporize any human being, and now those draconic flames were wrapping around Yuki's body. "You're wasting your time with magic," Yuki shouted, trying to throw the self-satisfied Guy off guard, then leapt away, a chill running down his spine. "Ha! You got some good instincts, don't you?" Guy smiled as he asked the question, but Yuki was too busy rolling on the ground to answer, frantically trying to put out the flames. Anti-skill did work, and it did prevent Guy's spell from injuring him. But the magic fire, which should have immediately extinguished itself, simply kept on burning. Even worse, it consumed oxygen just like a normal fire. Left unattended, it would have starved Yuki's lungs of air and killed him. What felt like ages to Yuki was just a few seconds. That's why he took no damage, but if Yuki failed to notice and kept attacking Guy, that would have sealed his fate. He'd instead focused on putting out the fire, as ridiculous as it made him look. Then, gauging Guy's reaction, Yuki considered one possibility he sincerely didn't want to believe in. He hated to admit it, but he needed to check how feasible it was. So standing back up, Yuki asked the question, not really expecting an answer. "Why didn't you follow up and attack me again? This isn't some kind of chivalrous duel." "Ah ha ha. Quit playing dumb. You must have realized by now, right? I've picked up on the secret to your powers." "I knew it," mused the disgusted Yuki. His anti-skill was omnipotent, capable of annulling all forces, but when faced with the sort of arts that fused magic together with skills, he couldn't cancel both at once. That was the only flaw to his skill, and therefore his sole weakness. Plus, no matter how much he could power himself up, Yuki was still just a human being. Perhaps he could generate antibodies to dispatch any poison attacks, but he couldn't go for very long without oxygen. This weakness, one created simply by being a living creature, made Yuki comprehend the extent of his disadvantage. Guy stood there, composed. "See, there's this man I know who can cancel all forms of magic, but if we ever fought, I'd still win." "Why?" "Because he can't cancel out anything besides magic. And as far as I know, there's no way to perfectly block the laws of physics in this world. Put all your focus on one point, and you'll open up a hole somewhere else. It seems like your ability applies to skills as well as magic, but..." He looked down upon Yuki, airing his thoughts instead of landing another strike. The detached, casual air was all carefully calculated. It'd be easy to kill Yuki, after all, but that wouldn't be any fun. Instead, Guy wanted to break his heart and force him to admit defeat in his despair. He already had him worked out. Yuki's attack told him all about what made him unique, and he had come up with countermeasures. No matter how well he could dispel magic and skills, he was human, and thus eminently beatable. Humans were weak, sporting frail bodies laden with vulnerable points, and it wasn't even worth formulating a strategy for killing them. Even in terms of core physical ability, there was a wide gap between Yuki and the Demon Lord. With Yuki's kick earlier, Guy left only a single small barrier in place as he tried blocking it, but it didn't even leave a scratch. Look at their respective magical energies, and it was comical to compare them at all. Guy was on the level of a true dragon, and for him, it'd be simple to launch another magic spell while Yuki was busy dispelling the first. "But just killing you on the spot would defeat the whole purpose of me showing up. Why don't you try entertaining me while I'm here?" Guy lorded over Yuki and taunted him. He wanted to corner Yuki, make him unleash his full powers, and only then would he utterly overwhelm him and claim victory. Yuki, meanwhile, could tell what Guy was thinking, painfully so, but he had no response. The breezy confidence vanished from his face as he coolly analyzed the situation and pondered a way to make it out alive. He was a rare genius, and his genius-level brain told him that the difference in strength was cataclysmic. But he didn't give up, instead mentally groping for any and all alternatives. The only hope he found was that Guy took him so lightly. "Yeah, with this much of a difference, I can see why he'd look down on me. But he's also just a tad bit arrogant." Yuki still had some tricks up his sleeve. One was the supernatural ability he was born with, another was avarice, the skill he took from Maribel. The third was instigator, capable of creating skills on the fly as needed. With those, he thought, he could make it through. Not killing me when you had the chance was a real bad idea. Gathering his breath, Yuki turned back toward Guy. "Well, just because you've spotted a few of my abilities doesn't mean you're safe to order me around yet." This wasn't sour grapes. He really believed this. If an opponent became riled up and lost their cool, that made them more likely to commit an error. That was the aim behind his taunting, but as he verbally parried with Guy, he also ran his powers up and down his own body, powers he usually kept bottled up. His spiritual force flowed, focusing itself around his soul, and he was using it to enhance his physical body, from human to enlightened, and from enlightened to saint. It was an evolution, one that lifted him even higher than Hinata, and when it was done, Yuki stopped breathing. A full saint was equivalent to a spiritual life form. Hinata was still too much a prisoner of her own physical body, but Yuki was already a level above her. Respiration was no longer required. Having disposed of his human weaknesses, Yuki was now striking a much stronger presence. If you converted his energy stores to magicules, they were now closer to Leon's or Luminuses. But Guy wasn't moved. "What a disappointment," he said, wholly non-agitated. "Is that your full power? Then we could duke it out 1,000,000 times, and you'd still never beat me." "Yep. And in that case, let's have some fun." With Yuki's signal, the battle began anew, and then, Yuki found out exactly why Guy was considered the strongest being. Nothing but despair ruled over the landscape. Yuki was now sprawled on the ground. Before Guy's overwhelming power, absolutely none of his attacks struck for damage. No petty tricks would work on him. Even Yuki's greatest attacks, moves he spent untold hours honing, failed to land a scratch upon Guy. God damn it. Yuki lacked the strength to so much as stand up. Turning toward Guy and cursing him was about the best he could manage. But his heart was still unbroken, something he deserved high praise for. Laplace had burned the battle into his memory, never blinking once. "It makes no sense to me. It ain't that the boss is a wimp. It's that Guy is just too much." Yuki was, indeed, stronger than Laplace imagined. He had some kind of eerie, supernatural force, and he used it to test out a variety of approaches with Guy. From simple throwing stones to fiery blasts, heavy pressure, and spiritual interference, all were lightly shrugged off, even with over 30 times the muscle of an average human, even with attacks lobbed at hundreds of miles an hour, it was just child's play to Guy. Not even anti-skill, the keystone of Yuki's defense, could fully disable Guy's magic. "That's not gonna work on me any longer, you know." As he warned, Guy had apparently found a way through anti-skill. It was a shocking revelation for Yuki. Kazalim and Clayman had taught him much about the 10 great demon lords, including the fact that Guy and Milim boasted another echelon of power. But not even these advisors could have known just how much of a gap there really was. If they had, they never would have endorsed his world conquest fantasies. So this is what a catastrophe-level Guy is like. It was well after the fact, but now Laplace realized there were things in this world that must never be prodded. Even he had some powers he kept secret from his own friends, but they were meaningless before an opponent like Guy. That showed how overwhelming a foe he was. No tactic imaginable could bring this demon lord to his knees. Even Yuki, a man clearly more powerful than Laplace, was helplessly toppled as if he were an infant. At this point, escaping alive was next to impossible. Someone, Laplace concluded, would need to make the ultimate sacrifice. But he kept up his usual calm demeanor as he took a step toward Guy. "Yep, I'd expect nothing less from the great demon lord Guy Crimson. We're the moderate jesters, you see, kind of a jack-of-all-trades outfit, and our boss, Mr. Yuki here, hired us for some assorted odd jobs. So now that he's been defeated, we're not really under any obligation to continue serving him." Laplace, what are you? It was incredibly petty, but Laplace seemed ready to betray his friend at that moment. He didn't know Guy personally, but the demon lord's selfishness and arrogance were the stuff of legend. He had no interest in the weak and refused to so much as talk to anyone he didn't consider worth his time. Taking this attitude toward Guy all but ensured Laplace's instant death, but it was also guaranteed to turn Guy's attention toward him, and Yuki could doubtlessly use that opening to make good his escape. It was a chance Laplace was willing to bet on. The one absolute rule among the moderate jesters was to never betray your friends, and especially not your client. That was why Laplace believed Yuki would immediately understand his intentions. Footman had a temper and tended to act before thinking, but his friends were always on his mind. Tia, meanwhile, was stronger than Clayman but so timid that she shied away from exercising her full force. Both of them had a tendency to get carried away, but they could be trusted to take care of Yuki. Thus Laplace decided to sacrifice himself. "I just want to help you, Mr. Guy, sir. So could you at least spare my life?" He couldn't have announced his betrayal more clearly. Footman and Tia acted confused. Guy showed Laplace a bemused grin. "All right, gotta keep angering him." Laplace had no intention of dying. He knew he didn't have much hope against Guy, but maybe there was a way to get out of this alive. Thus he didn't hesitate to speak once more, but before he could. "Ah ha ha. No need to force it, Laplace. Oh, man. Do I really look that helpless to you?" It was Yuki who spoke, staggering to his feet. Dot. Yuki was prepared to die. But at the same time, he could feel insatiable resentment filling his heart. He was disappointed in himself, and it riled him, and Laplace's words only deepened his anger. No way Laplace would ever betray him. This was all an act, he correctly surmised, a performance made because he trusted in Yuki, despite his cavalcade of blunders. That made him as happy as it did sorrowful. If I had even more power. The thought bubbled up from within his heart of hearts. It was a desire nobody could ever answer, but something deep inside him reacted. "You want power? Then take my hand." Huh? Yuki was confused for a moment. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him, but the voice was far too clear and distinct for that. "Let me take over, and you'll score the most powerful force imaginable. Even world conquest would be easy as pie, I think, if you took my hand. Now make your choice." The voice's offer made Yuki extremely uncomfortable. "Shut up. I'm me, all right. You're not my friend. And I'm not cheap enough to achieve my goals with the help of someone I don't even know." He couldn't have been clearer. Yes, to him, an ambition this big only gained meaning because he'd fulfill it himself. It was a stance Yuki refused to budge on. The voice fell silent, apparently unsure what to say. And to Yuki, if the voice was gone, it no longer mattered to him. Desperate though this moment was, something else weighed on Yuki's mind. Guy, it seemed, had some kind of purpose for him. That might have just been because he wanted to enjoy this battle with Yuki, but there had to be some other reason. He did say he wasn't a fan of Ludora gaining any more war power but turned that around, and if Yuki didn't side with Ludora, let alone the Eastern Empire, then perhaps there'd be no reason to kill him and his friends. And as for why Guy didn't kill Yuki right then? Eesh. I couldn't overpower him at all, but from here on out, it'll be a battle of wits, won't it? And rather than forcing such an awful role upon Laplace, I've got a much better chance if I do this myself. Yuki roused his spirits and got back to his feet. Brushing his bangs out of his face, Yuki smiled defiantly in spite of the desperate situation. "Yeah, I never thought you'd be that powerful, but now that I've fought you, I'm sure of it. You don't want to kill us at all, do you?" What makes you think that?" "Well, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could have massacred us a long time ago. So why did you keep beating me within an inch of my life but no further?" Yuki couldn't have sounded more confident with the question. Anyone would think it an incredibly reckless thing to do, facing an opponent like Guy who had just demonstrated such impenetrable might. But Guy still seemed entertained. "Oh, you noticed? Well, you don't need to know why." Yuki shrugged at this denial, but he expected as much. So he calmly moved on to step 2. "Okay. I got an offer for you, then." "An offer?" "Yeah. If you let us go, I think we can help you out a little." "Help me out?" "Right. I guess you don't want us cooperating with the Eastern Empire, but I'd like you to reconsider that." "Go on." "What I mean is, if we're trying to conquer the world here, then sooner or later we're gonna have to fight the Eastern Empire. And I just spent the past however many minutes learning how strong you are. I can feel it in my bones. I think it goes without saying that I don't plan to challenge you for a while to come, okay? So it'd be more natural for me to head over to the Empire and take it down first, right? This was coming completely out of left field. It left Footman and Tyr in the dust, certainly, and Laplace simply stood there as well, helplessly confused. He had just hatched a plan, was all but ready to die for it, and Yuki, his one lifeline, had stomped all over it. Now, he thought, it was solely up to Yuki's negotiations. The ball was in his court, but his fearless attitude gave Laplace an unstoppable cold sweat down his spine. It's crazy, the premise is just crazy. So why is Guy enjoying this? Laplace was right. Something about Yuki's offer made Guy grin ominously. Are you still trying to challenge me? Of course. I'm looking to conquer the world, remember. And I can't win against you right now, but I'm gonna surpass you someday. You'll see. As roughed up as he was, barely able to keep himself upright, Yuki remained defiant. He maintained his bold stance, as if the thought of being killed for his insolence had never occurred to him. Against someone like Guy, this was absolutely the correct tack to take. If you foolishly tried begging for your life, he'd immediately lose interest, and all that awaited you next was destruction. He may not have realized it, but Yuki had made the best choice possible. And if you topple the Empire, would that benefit me in some way? Yuki braced himself. They were at the crux of this discussion. He returned Guy's piercing gaze and nodded emphatically. That's right. I don't know why yet, but you don't want the Empire to conquer the West, either. Am I wrong? Guy and the Emperor Ludora had some history, that much was certain. It all came down to this. Yuki pleaded his case, mixing in a bluff or two. And I've got a lot of enemies to defeat, you know. Yes, I want to lend a hand to the Empire for now, but I'm not gonna affiliate myself with it. I'll eat away at it from the inside, and I'll use it for my own goals. I see. So if the Empire shares a goal with you, you'll help, but beyond that, there's no telling what will happen? And you're thinking about borrowing the Empire's forces to take down Leon and Rimuru. Aren't you, you bastard? Guy sharpened his eyes upon Yuki, seeming to see through everything. There was no taking back what Yuki said. Guy and Leon's relationship was a mystery to him, and there was no way he'd know what Guy thought of Rimuru, either. He couldn't know how his words would be construed, but still Yuki made no effort to hide his ambitions. That's right. I'll conquer them all, and then I'll beat you last, Demon Lord Guy Crimson. He deliberately made himself sound as brazen as possible. The rest was up to Guy's judgment. Following Laplace's lead would have gotten us killed anyway. Sorry, man, but you're gonna have to play my game instead. He silently apologized to his comrades. It was all or nothing, and Yuki was nothing if not greedy. He was making a dangerous bet. If he was going to survive, he wanted everyone else to as well. But the bet paid off. The moderate jesters, you said? Ah ha ha. Your ambitions certainly are a joke, aren't they? A joker card meddling with all the other pieces in our game. I like it. You're making a pretty convincing offer. You've got courage, at least, and for that I'll let you go this time. Yuki never did find out what Guy's mission was. All he knew was that he and his team were safe. Rain and Misery voiced no complaints about the decision. As Guy proclaimed, Yuki and the jesters left the scene without further incident. Once Guy was no longer in sight, Yuki and his group headed for the rendezvous they had arranged with Kagali's team. They assumed they were safe now, but nonetheless, everyone wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. The moment they sighted Kagali waiting for them, Laplace turned to Yuki and spoke. Are you kidding me? I can't believe this. All those declarations you made to a living monster like Guy. And, added Tyr, you even made him let us all go. I thought we were done for back there. Ho ho ho. Well, I believed in the boss from the start, said Footman. You weren't thinking a damn thing the whole time, retorted Laplace. Yuki cast Laplace a sidelong glance, then sat down on the ground, exhausted. What do you want from me? It was the only way we might have gotten out of there alive. And it worked, too, so I don't want to hear any complaints about it, okay? The damage he suffered was far more emotional than physical. He went to lie down right there, limbs spread out, and closed his eyes, body language indicating he'd tolerate no further argument. Left with nothing else to do, Laplace and Tyr explained matters to the oblivious Cagali. He fought with Guy? I'm amazed you lived to tell the tale. Her first reaction was abject surprise. It didn't take long for it to turn into sheer exasperation for Yuki. Ah, thought Yuki as he felt the breeze against his cheek, it's great to be alive. Then he had another thought. That mystery voice he heard beckoning in the middle of battle, what was it? A split personality of mine or something? No, that's ridiculous. But hang on. I don't think there's some hidden power within me, although I can think of one possibility. His thoughts had taken him to a power he had obtained just recently, the unique skill avarice. With it, he figured, the more he desired something, the greater his powers would grow. Nothing he threw at Guy in battle had any effect, including avarice, the strongest of the sin-based skills. The skill's a total mystery. And when it comes to magic and skills, I guess, you can always find something better than what you got, huh? Guy's magic overwhelmed my anti-skill, I need to figure out how that worked. Considering Yuki's sheer confidence, getting so easily defeated by Guy came as a shock. But Yuki wasn't about to give up. He had survived, and he needed to think up a plan for next time. His ability to turn the page like that was part of what made him such a powerful foe. He truly believed he'd obtained power beyond any demon lord, that he was the strongest of all, and even if he wasn't, with enough research and the right strategy, he could defeat any opponent. With the backup provided by Cagali, Laplace, and many others, he had created a decent-sized force for himself. All was going well, but he had experienced nothing but failure lately, and now, that day's encounter with Guy had utterly shattered his confidence. But that was, in its own way, a stroke of good luck. This has gotten so exciting, and that's how a game works, right? The more difficult it is, the more impassioned you get. Yuki wasn't fazed one bit. Already, he was deliberating with himself. Even with Initiator, Yuki couldn't read Guy's abilities. Given its unusual propensity for creating its own skill sets, Initiator should be easily able to analyze a target's unique skills. The opponent would have to actually use the skills for it to work, but Yuki believed that, faced with his powers, nobody would go around hiding their hand. But it hadn't worked on Guy. And at this point in time, that meant his opponent's skills were something beyond even unique. He wanted power. More power, enough to beat Guy with. Deep in his heart, the flames of greed roared high. It must mean there's a chance I can still evolve my avarice skill. Lord knows I'm greedier than anybody out there. If I can give it some of that greed. Reaching the conclusion filled Yuki with a nervous excitement that made him tremble. He thought about it a bit. Losing to Guy reminded him of the unfairness of the world. He wanted to resist it and emerge victorious, that was his prime desire. He closed his eyes, turning toward the voice inside him. His consciousness sank deep, deep, into the furthest recesses of his mind. Willing to join hands with me now? No. Not that. So why are you here? I have an errand for you. An errand? Yep. I thought you could give me your powers. Don't be silly. I'm not. I'm serious. What kind of stupidity is? Sorry. You're in my way. Question mark. The next moment, Yuki pictured his desires until there was nothing else left in his mind's eye. He all but begged for the realization of his true goals, using his powerful will as a weapon that bowed to no one. He was challenging himself to battle. And then the world language rang loud. Confirmed. Conditions satisfied. The unique skill avarice has evolved into the ultimate skill Mammon, Lord of Greed. Yuki opened his eyes, defiantly grinning. Then he spoke softly, too softly to be heard. I'll be sure to make good use of your power. That day, that moment, That location marked the birth of the world's most heinous magic born. Chapter 1. The Sound of Soldiers' Boots. I returned home the day our musical exchange program came to a close. Venom and the rest of the security detail weren't hurt. Neither were Batten and his orchestra. In fact, everyone was safe. So I gave the kids, who were under Diablo's protection, a week off. They weren't physically injured, but better safe than sorry. The experience certainly taught them the difference between training and real battle, I'm sure, and it definitely seemed to blunt their usual bubbly personalities. There might have been some mental trauma involved, so I told them to take a good rest. As for Luminous and Leon, we all decided to hold a meeting in due time. We had trouble agreeing on a location, but ultimately we settled upon Rimuru, the capital of Tempest. Luminous's empire of Lubelius would have its hands full rebuilding for a while, and Leon's domain of El Dorado was apparently dealing with its own heavy stuff at the moment and wasn't in much shape to accept foreign VIPs. Tempest, for the time being, was in the clear on that count, and I had no reason not to make the offer. Hell, we already had 2 demon lords living there anyway. I recalled the winged Ramirez and the freeloader Dino as I gave the go-ahead to Luminous and Leon, who wound up arriving in Rimuru the next day, leaving me zero time to relax and unwind. Leon made a stop back home to prepare before coming along. I thought this was needlessly quick, but he and Luminous wanted to compare stories and get working on ideas first thing. I had my own questions for them as well, so I indulged them on that. We met at my most ornate reception hall, Luminous, Leon, and me. Since it was just us 3 demon lords, I figured it was only appropriate to show off a bit. Only those involved with the fracas in Lubelius were invited. I wanted to hear everyone's story, and then I'd decide just how much I'd divulge about Chloe. Things being what they were, we had a tacit agreement to keep all this secret from the rank-and-filers in our respective forces, thus I was accompanied only by Shion, Diablo, and Veldora. I really wanted to keep Veldora out of there, he'd get bored halfway through, I knew, so I just wanted him to hang in his room for me. But for some reason, he was adamant about coming, bellowing how could I not participate in this? And all. If that's how far he was willing to go, I had little choice but to reluctantly agree. Shion, meanwhile, should have been recuperating from what were demonstrably serious injuries, but she was right as rain in almost no time. Ultra-speed regeneration really ain't no joke. Once again, I was reminded of how downright scary it was. So I was standing side by side with Diablo, Shion right behind me. Hinata was seated next to Luminous, Louis and Gunther accompanying them at the rear. Behind Leon were 2 knights, Arlos and Claude, standing bolt upright. After that, there was only Chloe, the star of the show. She was back to her usual young self, but I figured we should treat her as a grown-up. I had a long, rectangular conference table set up in the chamber and 6 padded seats put in place for us. Veldora and I sat adjacent, directly facing Hinata and Luminous, and Leon and Chloe scored the end spots. It was time to kick off this impromptu Demon Lord Summit of sorts. First, I had Chloe explain things, going over what happened in Lubelius while Hinata added the occasional comment or two. The story was, to put it lightly, unbelievable under normal circumstances, but after the metaphysical experience I'd had, I was completely willing to accept it. And so thanks to Hinata and Rimuru's aid, I managed to escape from my infinite cycle of death and rebirth. Once Chloe wrapped things up, everyone looked ready to respond as they gauged one another. Veldora, never one to read a room, kicked off the debate. So the hero who sealed me away back then was. That's not particularly important, is it? I certainly didn't think so, but then Hinata replied, that was me. Now we're tied 1-1, aren't we? Isn't it nice, getting to taste defeat for a change? What? Oh, do you have a problem with that? Because I'd be happy to play a tiebreaker right now, GNNNHH. Very well. If you insist, I shall tap upon my true forces. Well, this sure wasn't getting us anywhere. The normally cool as a cucumber Hinata always turned extra petty around Veldora. Yes, I'd have to step in. Okay, that's enough. You can tackle that question when you're alone, guys. It's vital that you show that foolish dragon some discipline, Hinata, Luminous chided. Should you challenge him, be sure to inform me. I will gladly provide assistance. Quit fanning the flames, Luminous. Look, I said, changing the subject, all's well that ends well, okay. But what I'm wondering about right now is, I got killed, didn't I? So was someone from the Empire behind that? To me anyway, this was a vital question. The Empire was acting as suspicious as ever at that moment. If that was about to become open hostility, we needed to be on our guard. Probably, Chloe replied. And I think the same person killed Hinata as well. The Empire had a pretty capable fighter on its side, so maybe you guys all took them on at once or something. I didn't see the light that cut through Hinata, though. Well, if someone out there managed to kill Hinata, then whacking me before I became a demon lord didn't seem outrageous. I've evolved into a demon lord, but that's no reason to let my guard down. It may have been a different axis of time, but if someone's killed me once, then of course I was gonna be on the lookout for 'em. If we wound up facing off against the Empire, I'd have to watch out. That's a good idea, said Chloe. The Empire's a lot more dangerous than you think, Rimuru. Veldora went berserk after you were killed, but the Empire repelled him, too. During this Veldora battle, Hinata was murdered, and then Chloe was sent back in time. The memories of what happened after Hinata's murder existed within Chronoa's mind, but only in bits and pieces. Chances were, though, the enraged Veldora and Chronoa clashed with each other, and then the Empire made its move in the midst of all that chaos. We all saw what Chronoa could do, so we knew that simply joining a fight with her involved was pretty amazing already. It could be, was likely, even, that the Empire's war power was way beyond what we'd assumed. Luminous and Leon seemed to agree with that. We were all starting to see the Empire as a dangerous threat. But as the reception hall began sinking into a gloom, Veldora went off on another wild tangent. I find it hard to believe I'd simply go insane, he said, sneering. The reaction across the room was unanimous. Are you kidding me? Running his mouth in the midst of this weighty discussion, like a golfer teeing up. Well, it had to be Veldora, I suppose. Wait. Why are you looking at me like that? A gentleman like me would hardly lose his temper so catastrophically. If I may, you definitely went on an extended rampage long ago, and it's easy to imagine you in that state. But, hey, maybe in this other timeline, he killed me after I resurrected him, which then set him off in a violent rage. Because honestly, that scenario gave me some warm fuzzies. All right, I said, smiling a bit as I assuaged Veldora, let's leave it at that for now. The Empire is dangerous, we concluded, so it was time to move on. Next came the memories of Chronoa, as far as Chloe could recall them. After the Empire defeated Veldora, the world plunged into a great war, East pitted against West. It dragged along, the Eastern Empire holding the advantage, and in the midst of this, Milim made her move. My death must have antagonized her against the Empire, and she wasn't afraid to demonstrate her hostility. That made Guy intervene, and once again, we had Milim versus Guy, the world's worst possible matchup. Dagral and Luminous also clashed on the battlefield, apparently, spreading the flames of war further. At this point, Chronoa fought against someone and lost her life. She had sped into battle, fighting as far as her spirit could take her. All that remained was her will of destruction, so she was mowing down the big and powerful left and right. As a result, she didn't remember who finally bested her. And only so many people have what it takes to beat Chronoa, huh? Guy, I'd imagine. It could only be Guy. Luminous and Leon immediately replied to my musing, and I agreed with them. We didn't know how the fight between Guy and Milim panned out, but really, Guy was the only person capable of killing Chronoa. Or maybe not, for all we knew. We had no idea what Guy's motive could have been. So what made Chronoa so supportive of me, then? Despite what Chloe told us, I still didn't see how Cronoa and I were connected. She was resurrected after I died, we never would have met each other, but clearly she had a thing for me. I may not be too quick on the uptake, but even I would notice that much, and that was true from the very beginning, wasn't it? She even gave me a big hug and a kiss after I summoned her for Chloe. Why all that the first time? I'd thought, but I suppose Cronoa had her reasons. Well, because you saved me, Rimuru, Cronoa said, finishing Chloe's thought. In the future world, where all I did was rampage, you were the one who saved me. I'm sure of it. Hey! I was about to say that. Oh, let me at least tell him that much. I'm you as well, after all, so it's the same thing, isn't it? To the outside observer, it looked like Chloe had a particularly flashy multiple personality disorder. Apparently Cronoa butted into conversations whenever Chloe let her guard down. I'm sure they both had a lot to get used to. The two of them proceeded to take turns talking. According to Chloe's, or Cronoa's, memory, I apparently wasn't so dead in the future after all. The Empire defeated me, we were certain of that, but it looked like I managed to come back to life somehow. Which? Neat, I guess. I can't speak for myself, but my faithful friend Raphael would never make a mistake. It sounded like Raphael took its damn time, but in the end, it still found a way to keep me alive. By that point, though, the world had changed profoundly. Veldora was gone, Tempest was in ruins. A massive war had erupted between East and West, and demon lords were waging bloody battles for supremacy over one another, in which case, I could pretty easily imagine my feelings about the whole situation. I'm me, after all, and chances are I'd devote myself to tracking down anyone who survived. Maybe I couldn't rescue everybody, but I could at least lend a hand to those I was closely connected to. That was just what I did, it turned out, and in the end, I found Chloe/Cronoa. Cronoa's recollections were too fragmented to answer the bigger questions, but either way, we had a grasp of the general flow. I ran into Cronoa, fighting her on multiple occasions, and I'm sure I managed to win her over again. But as Cronoa told me, the fate of the world was already sealed by then. As you all predicted, I fought against Guy. I don't remember the events leading up to that, but I'm positive Rimuru wasn't there. Then, just as I was about to die, Rimuru held me close, and the next thing I knew, I saw Rimuru and Chloe from the past. So Guy was there after all, that didn't surprise me. The question was what exactly happened before Cronoa's death, but I presumed that was where her journey back through time began. However, that still didn't adequately explain how she arrived at Chloe's timeline. Maybe there was a chance I did something to engineer that? Had I evolved into a demon lord by that point? Yep. And you were even more powerful than you are now. Hang on, can she tell that just by looking at me? I liked to think I was pretty strong at this point, but it was hard to believe Cronoa would misjudge someone's prowess. I suppose losing my closest friends drove me to do some pretty wild stuff. Now, of course, none of this had any bearing on me at the moment, but we did have the Empire to think about. Maybe I should have viewed this more optimistically. Like, I still had room to grow, that sort of thing. Regardless, if I was stronger than I was now, my great sage must have made the transformation to Raphael by this time. If so, I could totally see it doing something wacky like transmitting the memories from Cronoa's spirit into the young Chloe. Can't deny it, huh? And now, I felt, I had a handle on what happened in the future. Hey, all's well that ends well, right? That's a pretty casual approach to take, Hinata snapped. Oh, don't be that way, I replied, giving the sneering Hinata a gentle smile. Chloe's just fine, as you can see, and Veldora's already been resurrected. All we gotta do is keep an eye on those two, and we won't have to worry about them going berserk. So the only problem left to deal with is the Empire, isn't it? Indeed, said Luminous. If Dagrel decides to attack me, I will take care of him. You saved Chloe for me, it is the least I can do to repay the favor. Luminous and Chloe really did seem to get along. Now my stock with the Emperor was skyrocketing. I suppose this meant we could enjoy an even better relationship than before. Dagrel's ambitions were one issue to tackle, but Luminous was willing to shoulder that burden without me having to ask, promising me she'd endeavor to keep the West peaceful. The Western nations were, technically speaking, part of Luminous's domain. There were some skirmishes with Guy's forces in certain areas, but that was more a pastime for Guy, nothing serious. Luminous must have concluded that it wasn't worth obsessing over. Instead, Dagrel was the bigger problem, and she had been on the lookout for a while, wondering when hostilities with him might break out. If we fought in the future, Luminous said, there is a good chance he'll take advantage of any moves the Empire makes. I wasn't so sure of that. Yeah, but Dagrel's sons are living here in Tempest, don't forget. I doubt he'd resort to force that readily. If Dagrel rolled into combat, there had to be a reason for it. Huh? Dagrel's sons? Is that true? Luminous demanded. Sure is. They're training hard under Shion at the moment, I replied. That they are, Shion briskly interjected. They have much left to learn, but they have started to earn their keep as of late. I've occasionally rewarded their efforts with some of my home cooking, and they cried tears of joy over it. I found it quite charming, I'll add. Tears of joy? I dunno about that. I mean, sure, if a girl you have a crush on cooks for you, that'd make anyone happy, but that cooking had to be edible, for one. But, hey, if you could deal with its appearance and texture, Shion's meals had grown surprisingly consumable. So maybe we were good there? If they weren't complaining, it was nothing I needed to comment on. Let's leave it at that. Hearing that Dagrel's sons were in this nation made Luminous give me an astonished kinda look, but it was gone in an instant. She recovers fast. Then it is true, I suppose. Perhaps Dagrel was being coerced by another, but then, this is the future, so using the past tense is rather silly. He might be coerced by someone. A war would take place in the future, but at the moment, things were pretty peaceful. Dagrel must have had some reason to harbor dreams of territorial expansion. He didn't seem like that much of a villain when I met him at Walpurgis. Maybe I'd chat with Dagra and his brothers to see what I could find out. If there was some kind of problem, I'd be happy to talk about it. That'd beat fighting a war over it any day. Right. I'll investigate that on my end, I assured Luminous. I will hold you to that. I have no interest in fighting a futile war, after all. So we decided to examine the Dagrel issue and make a decision later. It'd suck to have him working in tandem with the Empire, so just in case, Luminous would keep a close eye on him, too. Louis and Gunther nodded their approval, so I felt the task was safe in their hands. That leaves Guy to discuss. I'd like to talk about that, if I could. There was no point complaining to Guy about what he would do in the future, but I still had my concerns. It was best, I thought, to explain matters to him as well. How deep I should go with him, of course, was another thorny issue. But Veldora suddenly jumped in. Guy is an arbitrator. He's nothing to me right now, but long ago, I have a vague hunch that he might have annihilated me, or something to that effect. Or not at all, even. It hardly counts if nobody remembers it, right? I wasn't sure where to begin with this little confession. What did he mean, Guy was an arbitrator? And they fought at some point in the past, and Veldora got annihilated? That was news to me. Also, having it not count because you don't remember it sounded like a dumb excuse even for a young child, but I didn't want to dogpile on him, so I kept quiet. Ho, remarked Luminous. Guy has his wiser side, I see. An arbitrator? Leon paused a moment. Guy is certainly not allied with humankind, but he's not hostile to them, either. If he killed Cronoa in the future, it's easy to surmise that Cronoa was little more than her will of destruction at that point, and Guy saw her as a threat to the world's continued existence. So what's this arbitrator stuff about? It seemed like I was the only one out of the loop. An arbitrator, Luminous explained, is part of a separate system from heroes and demon lords. Their mission is to prevent the destruction of the world. It is said they speak for Veldenava himself, the creator and Star King Dragon. Indeed. The Star King, my elder brother, created this world, and he set up this system so nobody would go around ripping it apart. Aha, and so Veldora was annihilated after trying to do just that. Now it made sense, it proved that the true dragon definitely did wake back up at that point in the future. I wasn't so sure Veldora lost his memory of it, but I was better off not bringing it up. So that's how it is? In that case, I don't think Guy's likely to target Chloe right now. Aha. I mean, I remember Chronoa going crazy, and, I don't have any personal thing against the Demon Lord Guy, so. Hinata and Chloe seemed convinced as well, smiling as they chatted about this. As long as nobody went berserk, it seemed like we could avoid conflict with Guy. Well, in that case, should we let Leon discuss this with Guy? I asked. Right, Leon replied. My and Chloe's futures are riding on this, after all. Hang on, Leon. You're not involved in this. Chloe, with all her innocent, childlike looks, could be downright scary when chiding Leon like that. I felt kind of bad for him. Leon was this really handsome, cool-looking dude, but I guess he got the villain treatment a lot of the time, as his entire relationship with Shizu attested to. But between his tongue-tied ways and knack for painting himself in a bad light, I felt like maybe he was just really misunderstood. To put it succinctly, he was like Masayuki, except the exact opposite. Chloe treated him like a friendly neighborhood boy, a big brother-like figure. Nothing romantic, though. Apparently Leon had always been popular with the ladies, and perhaps thanks to that, Chloe never picked up on the love he had for her. Thinking about it, I had to pity him. For once in my life, I decided to try showing him a little more kindness. So I'd call this summit a success. Both demon lords had pledged to support me. We just needed to stay alert for the Empire, and beyond that, we'd each figure out the next moves to make. But right when I was about to adjourn. Please, just one moment. He has guests. They're in the middle of an important meeting. Oh? I'm impressed that you spotted me barging in. But since I'm here and all, mind if I say my hellos? There was a clamor down the hall, that voice, that pompousness. It had to be Guy, the strongest of all demon lords. He had made it this far in without me noticing, and only a very small number of people could do that. Report. No signs of hostility. Or did it notice all along? Now wasn't the time to debate about that, though. I hurriedly left my seat, but before I could even lift a finger, Diablo sneered and walked over to the door. Yo. Go away. He concluded the short exchange by slamming the door in Guy's face. This was too much to handle. The rest of us froze on the spot. Oh, come now, Diablo. I'll have none of that, Guy shouted angrily after opening the door once more. TCH. You are meddling in a vital summit. It has only been a day, and our preparations are not yet complete. We would like to take our time discussing matters with you, so please, do not come until you are invited. Diablo was trying to be polite, but he was acting damn sure of himself in front of Guy. Did they know each other, maybe? I wasn't the only one who thought so, judging by Luminous's and Leon's surprised looks. Unbelievable, Luminous scoffed. Not surrendering a single step to Guy, although I'd expect nothing less from Noir. What? Noir? Leon yelled. Why is someone so lofty in the service of Rimuru? The words I'm picking up do not portend good things for my future. Diablo's someone lofty? His head's in the clouds, yeah, but. And what's this Noir stuff? As I sat there confused, things grew even more chaotic. So Rimuru, are you all right? I just heard from my sister that. My lord, I felt the presence of the red. Oh, is this a war? Because if it is, I'm ready to fight. First Benimaru rushed in, then Ci. Behind them came Carrera, and at almost the same time, Ultima came barreling in as well. It was nuts. At this point, I may as well have allowed Guy inside instead of booting him. I had no intention of inviting him anyway. It looked like I'd have to discuss all this in detail with Diablo later. Now, though, I needed to restore order. Everyone, calm down. And you step back, too, Diablo. That finally made everyone settle down a bit. Once all was quiet, I continued. I hadn't planned this, but, Guy, I actually have something to discuss with you, too. If you're here and all, I might as well have you join the summit. You okay with that? Sure. Perfect, even. I need to talk to you, too. I'd wanted Leon to handle him, but I guess we had a change of plans. With Guy's permission in hand, I then had to chase everybody else out of the room. Okay, there's nothing to worry about, all right? I'll call you guys if something comes up, so get back to work for me. Everyone looked amply relieved. I heard some unwelcome grumbling, such as the Red's done it again. I don't stand a chance against him, for now. And PFFT. I thought we could start bashing some heads, but overall, things were under control. The rest of the rabble were back at their posts. Shuna left to prepare some tea for those of us still in the reception hall. As she did, Leon spoke first. Now what is the meaning of this? Why is June here, of all people? Huh? I have a question as well, said Luminous. I presume the other one was Violet, but were my eyes playing tricks on me? I heard she was rather gloomy and spiteful, so I can't be entirely certain. Huh? June, Violet. What are these people talking about? Oh, wait. Did you mean Carrera and Ultima? Diablo over there invited them, but they're actually a lot more talented than I thought. I was trying to explain things, but Leon and Luminous didn't let me finish. Carrera? And Ultima? Did you give those two names? Simply unbelievable. So Diablo wasn't enough for you? You've brought even more primals under your wing. Leon was on his feet and shouting. Luminous looked completely out of sorts. Both of them fixed me with piercing glares. Yeah, isn't it crazy? That's partly why I'm here, so I can grill him about what he's up to. Even Guy was spouting nonsense at me. And I mean, what was I supposed to say? As I floundered for a response, Shuna brought in some tea on a cart. We all fell silent, not wanting to get in her way. A pleasant aroma filled the chamber, helping us regain our calm. My mind thus cleared, I tried considering what everyone was saying. The key word here was primal, as stated by Luminous. And that meant. Understood. It is one standard for describing demons. Right, I remember having that explained to me. They were defined as the first demons, and all that. Wait, the first demons? Diablo, you aren't one of the first demons or something, are you? Well, he casually replied, yes, I am a leader of one of the 7 bands of demons, among the firstborn into this world. Oh man. I had no idea the demon I summoned when I transformed into a demon lord was something this huge. I knew he was super powerful, but this was even crazier than I thought. You didn't know that? Leon asked me. Incredible, Luminous scoffed. I always thought you had a screw loose, but not to this extent. Leon's and Luminous's gazes were boring into me. But what could I say? If Diablo answered a summon as off the cuff as mine was, there was no way he could have been anyone that amazing. I think I even stunned Raphael into silence. But Diablo's true identity wasn't the real shocker. Raphael seemed surprised that I didn't know about it myself. I suppose Raphael thought I knew all about the primal demons, then. But hang on. I feel like Elmesia, the heavenly emperor of Thalion, mentioned something about primals as well. So that was why she warned me so much about them. Because she picked up on who Diablo was. And I would have, too, if I had paid a little more attention. Hey, this happens, you know. You get an idea in your head, and you stick with it. I'm not gonna investigate every little factoid I know, and I'm not gonna bring it up with everybody I see. And as far as Raphael was concerned, there was no special need to tell me. What a pitfall. Having a dictionary on hand wouldn't help much if you never used it. Raphael had been giving me a lot of helpful advice lately, but not even it could understand what I did and didn't know. No matter how brilliant my partner was, it meant nothing if I didn't utilize him correctly. I sure learned my lesson about that today. Again. Ignoring my surprise, Diablo began regaling the audience with the story of how he met me. Apparently this extended all the way back to me encountering Shizu. She and Diablo knew each other, it turned out, and Diablo happened to be visiting this land when he picked up on the presence of Shizu in her final moments. The idea of Diablo being aware of me since back then was astounding, although I still had no idea what his motivations were. The lower demons in my family accused me of fleeing my post in order to serve Soraimaru, an accusation that wounds me deeply. But I took my time. I waited for just the right opportunity, and in the end, I successfully answered Soraimaru's call. Diablo flashed a contented smile. So him coming to that summon wasn't some fluke after all. It was inevitable because he planned it that way. I could feel a headache coming on from the shock. What's more, in another wild revelation, Diablo revealed that he was so jealous of Beretta that he tried to purge him without alerting me. However, as he dared to put it, since I had created Beretta's body, he deemed it too much of a waste to damage it at all. This body was handmade by Soraimaru, Beretta had scolded him, and if you lay a finger on it, he'll be quite displeased. Truly, this was exhausting me. What a ridiculously long story this was. Someone please stop him, I wanted to beg, but Diablo was talking a mile a minute, and nobody could get a word in edgewise. So I finally spoke up. Diablo. That's enough, all right. We need to continue the summit. Satisfied now? Guy added, backing me up. Enough about you, Diablo. That bum Dino's here, too, isn't he? Can you call him over for me? That was finally enough to shut Diablo up. I will bring Sir Dino over at once, Shuna said, bowing and taking advantage of her chance at long last to leave. Or escape, I thought, my heart about ready to give out on me. But I was getting to the good part. Diablo looked eager to continue, but everyone ignored him. If we let him prattle on, there was no telling what he'd say next. Keeping him quiet right then would do wonders for my blood pressure. Somewhere in the midst of all this, Guy had sat down in a chair. Leon's attendants had brought a seat over from the adjacent waiting area for him. "Ah, how thoughtful of you," he said. Arlos and Claude nodded their appreciation behind Leon. They must have known Guy from before, otherwise, I'm sure, they'd be too scared of offending him to move at all. I suppose I should have arranged something for Guy, but my brain was running on empty. Having this pair of knights around was a godsend. For all I knew, I could have pissed Guy off without even realizing it. Besides, the secretary who should have been backing me up was too busy talking his head off, and Xian was frozen by my side in a classic not my problem power move. "Sorry to make you handle that," I said to the two knights. "No need to worry about it. We understand your situation, Lord Raimaru. You're busy trying to shoo people away from this chamber, aren't you? Allow us to handle this much for you." Arlos and Claude were really nice. Diablo and Xion could learn a lot from them. "Guys, can you try to be as considerate as those two over there, please?" Heh. I had perhaps grown a little too impassioned. Diablo seemed ready to pin the blame on Guy's unexpected appearance, but yeah, maybe this was just an unlucky break for him. Normally, he'd never overlook something like that. "Duly noted, sir." Xion, on the other hand, was the ever-obedient student. Great at saying yes, teacher. But not at much else. I could only pray the knowledge would stick. So Guy sat down, acting as pompous as ever. As he did, Shuna came back in with Dino, and Ramirez, too, for some reason, and before long the summit was back in session. Our first topic was the primal demons. "So, Dino, you got an excuse for us?" Guy asked. "Excuse? For what?" Dino's reply came too naturally. It only riled Guy further. "Don't give me that crap, you. Why didn't you stop him from naming the three of them?" "Yeah. That was important, right? By him, I suppose Guy meant me, But look, if I'd known these three were such bad news, I would have never even thought about assigning them names, okay? It was kinda too late now, but I wished I'd had some warning, at least. Look, why in the name of all that's unholy do you think I sent you here in the first place? Sightseeing? No. This is a reconnaissance detail. Reconnaissance, you hear me? Watching this exchange, I realized that even Guy had his own struggles. I'd had a hunch about this, but it turned out Dino was a spy after all, although I wished Guy didn't have to say so right in front of him. And you? Don't act like you're not involved in this. Oh, and now Guy was taking it out on me? Great. It didn't seem fair to be yelled at by the person spying on me, but I supposed I was the cause of this, so to speak. I wanted to plead my case, but a reflexive reaction wasn't a smart move. This was Guy, after all, inviting his ire upon me was never a smart idea. Qua ha ha ha. Why get so worked up over such trifles, Guy? He's got quite a long history of naming people willy-nilly, you know. Veldora, for a change, actually stepped up to defend me. I gave him a subliminal attaboy. Silence, you child. The adults are talking. All right, but a few choice words from Luminous shut him up. He can dish it out, but he sure can't take it, huh? And now the whole room was aware of that. Still, at least his contribution pointed Guy's ire away from me momentarily. I seized the opportunity to launch an offensive of my own. Okay, so Dino came here to keep tabs on me, then? I'll refrain from complaining about that for now, but it's true that Dino's at fault for not stopping me, and the person who trusted him enough to send him on that mission has some responsibility as a supervisor, doesn't he? Don't you think so, Guy? Spreading the responsibility, in so many words. I wasn't about to shoulder all the blame here, so I tried to hand some of it back over to Dino and Guy. The former was clearly at fault, so all that remained was to rope the latter in, too. He's right, Guy. Besides, I told you, I can't watch over him. I can't believe you actually thought about making me do work. Dino must have been pretty quick on the uptake, because it looked like he immediately picked up on my plan, and on the bandwagon he went. I swear, you people. Guy was frustrated. I took pains not to rile him further, feeling around for a landing point. Besides, Dino continued, I never even had any time to stop him. You know, when I saw Rimuru bringing the primals over, I was so surprised that I couldn't even speak. I mean, like, 3 of them. Diablo was always kind of a weirdo, so I could understand him, but can you even imagine Testarossa working for someone? Nobody could. True enough. Oops. Sounded like Dino was trying to wriggle his way out of this. Guy was about to accept it, too. I didn't like how this was going. Listen, guys, Diablo brought them over because he said they'd be useful, and I believed him, all right. I never thought they were these super powerful beings, and they were perfectly happy to be serving me. They're under Diablo's direct control, so he's the one responsible for them. And it'll be on me as well if something happens, but it's only natural to trust in your employees, isn't it? I tried to strike a more upbeat tone as I pushed the blame on Diablo. He was the one who started this. I thought he deserved that much. I turned my eyes toward him, all but begging him to take on Guy's anger for me. For reasons only he knew, he eagerly nodded. Your trust in me is encouraging like nothing else. I must be more diligent than ever to live up to your expectations. Guy took one look at Diablo's gleaming smile and fell silent. He leaned back in his seat, clearly fatigued. So this is Diablo's fault? He pompously stated. Well, not his fault, exactly. We're kind of victims here, too, you know. I hemmed and hawed a bit, Dino faltering as well. Only Diablo retained his sparkling pride, looking as ebullient as ever. Well, this Guy pointed at Diablo, has been a nutcase for ages now, so I'm not going to whine about that at this point. And, Dino, if you can't stop Rimuru, well, circumstances being what they were, I understand that. Whoa, This is getting way out of control. But you, Rimuru? Oh, here we go. Why am I taking the heat? What about me? I couldn't lose my cool here. I had to be bold with Guy, be bold and act like I did nothing wrong. So to keep him from picking up on my indecision, I had Raphael take over primary control of my body. That'd keep me safe. No matter how much I was panicking on the inside, I'd remain calm and collected on the surface. Don't give me that shit. Guy then proceeded to angrily lecture me. Thanks to me, the balance of the world had totally collapsed, blah blah blah, now nobody knew how the world situation would unfold, blah blah blah. It was some pretty heady stuff, and even giving Raphael bodily control didn't accomplish much. I guess Guy was a lot more calculating than I thought. And what's more, thanks to you, Misery's mission was a big failure, too. I'm gonna hold you at fault for that, you hear me? I wasn't sure how I was at fault for something I wasn't aware of, but if Guy wanted to pin the blame on me, then so be it. I just nodded, said, all right, and let it go. The lecture was over, but Guy still wasn't done talking. Apparently Guy made a deliberate habit of triggering calamities at regular intervals, so the whole of humanity considered him an enemy. His goal was to stoke a unified fear against an all-powerful foe, keeping humankind from wasting its time with needless internal power struggles. When Granville was in power, Guy took no action, refraining from any major moves, but now that Granville attempted an all-out attack on Luminous, the balance of power was totally out of whack. Thus, Guy had ordered Misery to reunite humankind with an event that had terrorized everyone at once. Her idea was to kill off the Council and all its members, reminding the leaders of the Western nations just how fearsome a demon lord could be. That, she reasoned, would help unite all the leaders peacefully. So Misery attacked the Council, and who did she find there but Blanc, or Testarossa now, I suppose? I'm so used to her old title that I can't help but keep using it. But regardless, Misery avoided a confrontation with Testarossa, and so her plan was foiled. That's all well and good. The problem is what comes after that. As long as we can't rule over those cunning humans with fear, they're doubtlessly gonna start squabbling among themselves. And with the Rotzos a thing of the past, history tells us that the power struggle's only gonna get more intense. What do you think will happen if the Eastern Empire makes a move while the Western nations are carrying on with that nonsense? They'll lose big, is what? And it's your fault, Rimuru. So tell me what you're gonna do about it. Well, didn't expect that. Guy was trying to prevent the Western nations from tearing themselves apart. He never seemed to take much interest in the human race, but maybe he was trying to keep doomsday from happening, at least. Guess that was his job as arbitrator and stuff. He wasn't at all a friend to humankind, and his means could get pretty violent, but in a way, I think I could understand his motives. Now I had to question my plans for the Western nations. I didn't even realize Testarossa and Misery had made contact with each other, but I couldn't go and reveal that at this point. All I really wanted to do was make humanity recognize us and build friendly relations with them, but... As I pondered over how to answer him, Diablo stepped up in my place. Ignoring the scowl this elicited from Guy, he said, "Heh. What will he do, you ask? All Sir Rimuru desires is making his ideals reality." I was anxious about what he might say, but it wasn't like I had any concrete ideas. I doubted idealistic arguments would work on Guy, so I counted on Diablo and his supreme confidence to save the day, but I guessed he disappointed me. Huh? He went with the whole lofty ideals argument I'd already dismissed. What do you mean by that? Oh, it's very simple, Guy. I am merely saying there's no point in doing something as bland and uninteresting as terrorizing people. Certainly, they'll be more submissive to you, but it's not making the most thorough use of their abilities. Terror, you see, is an emotion that dissipates over time. No matter how much tragedy you engineer, it is doomed to fade into oblivion. Once it does, all that remains is bitterness. Continue. Bitterness, over time, turns into hatred. It drives people to take revenge upon their abusers. Humanity, lacking in intelligence, as clever as they may be, fails to notice exactly how absolute the difference in power is between them and us. If they are agitated by monsters or the like, they'll quickly dirty their hands with some quite foolish behavior. Right. And that's why I purge them. Because I'm not willing to let them get their hands dirty. And I tell you, it is a pointless errand. The inherent foolishness of man causes their memories to fade. One generation gives way to the next so quickly, there's nothing to be done about that. However, he paused for a moment, eyeing Guy with a serious look. Instead of letting the Rotzos corner the market, if you redistribute the wealth, you can have nations rebuild their relationships while retaining some amount of fairness. That, in turn, creates new economic principles, and then? You leave these new principles, these new choices, and you delude them into thinking they've chosen their own future. That way, the foolish humans will believe they've created it for themselves. This system is something that, unlike human memory, never fades. It allows you to rule the human world semi-permanently. Suraimuru is the one managing that, and I see it as my personal job. Wow. Diablo was talking sense. So basically, if they build it up themselves, they'll treat it better? Also, was that really what I had in mind? I felt like I might have said something along those lines, but I didn't think it was anything quite so grandiose. That, and he was talking based on the foregone conclusion that it'd work, which was kinda scary. I see. So if you hold on to the economy and guarantee their safety for nothing in return, the weak will come to depend on you? A society where everything's resolved through bloodless wars. Yeah, maybe that'd be better than life under the Rotzos, Guy nodded, seemingly re-evaluating Diablo. But of course. A world where the masses are left satisfied, not the classes. The supply and demand chains that result will come to create new possibilities as well. And that, Guy, is what Suraimuru hopes for. He wasn't wrong, I suppose. What I really looked forward to was seeing how culture would advance and evolve. I wanted to see more mass media for everyone to enjoy, movies, music, manga, novels. Creating that kind of art required a foundation that afforded you enough free time in life. I wanted to give people a chance to enjoy prosperity so they could discover these new, previously unknown talents within them. I'll freely admit that I didn't think too much beyond that. So once they learn how nice peace can be, they'll be afraid of losing it? Guy asked Diablo. Precisely. In a word, it is the concept of gratitude. People appreciate Suraimuru for protecting the peace, and so they contribute to preserving that peace worldwide. I believe that is far more efficient than the terror-driven rule you picture. Before I knew it, the two of them seemed to be fully understanding each other. Luminous and Leon, listening to Diablo's blueprint for the future, as well as their attendants, even, they all looked at me, bemused wonder on their faces. Under that kind of pressure, there was absolutely no way I could tell anyone I wasn't thinking anything like that at all. But if we're going to do that, it'll take a long-term perspective and a lot of intricate calculations, won't it? You have to manage it, or I can easily see there being too many humans around to deal with. They'll get all carried away. You want me to go through all that trouble? Come on, Guy. It's not like caring for a pet. You're not gonna wake up one day and find that your hamster had a dozen babies or something. Ha! And you think Suraimuru is incapable of seeing into the future that far? Perhaps it would be too difficult to manage for you, but for Suraimuru, it's something he could handle in his spare time. I think it's safe to say there is no need for concern. Whoa! Why was Diablo assuming I'd manage this? I mean, I was pretty sure he and I talked about how running the world from behind the scenes was a nice, demon lord-like way to go about matters, but if you said that in front of Guy and the other demon lords, they would meddle with me, wouldn't they? I was unnerved, really, but apparently I shouldn't have been. In fact. You think, huh? Well, okay. I'll leave all that to you. I really doubt it's gonna go as well as you describe, but it's no skin off my nose if you fail. 'Cause if you do fail, I'll just step up and start culling those fools. So let's see you take responsibility for this, all right? Surprisingly enough, Guy was smiling at me. And if that was what it had come to, I'd just have to accept it. If I said all right a moment ago, I couldn't really say no way now, without warning. I think Diablo was exaggerating things a little, but he's not wrong, generally speaking. Sure, it's a bit idealistic, but I feel like it'd be nice if things worked out like that, and regardless of what you have to say about it, I'm gonna try to engineer world peace my own way. That was my promise. And so, without really understanding what was going on, I was officially appointed by the Octagram to manage the Western nations. It would have been great if the summit mercifully ended right there, but we still weren't done with everything. Rimuru, rumbled Leon, let me give you a word of warning. Carrera, formerly known as June, is the kind of short-tempered demon who'd freely lob nuclear magic around if she's seized by the impulse. You'd best keep her on a short leash, or else the capital you took great pains to build will become a pile of ash. That's right, chimed in Luminous. And let me just add this. As mentioned earlier, the Violet I know is a malicious, moody individual, the living embodiment of brutality. Unlike the monster races, she doesn't seek to eradicate the human race, but she is fickle, prone to quickly change her mind on matters. Perhaps she's pretending to be a nice young lady in front of you, but I'd be very hesitant to let my guard down. Their advice didn't put my mind at ease much. And although they didn't spell it out, it sounded like Testarossa was even more trouble than Carrera and Ultima. This was starting to look like bad news. Well, starting to isn't the right way to put it, maybe. More like it was bad news, and I'd finally just noticed. I now knew Testarossa and the others were primal demons, and I had just been told by my demon lord peers that they were my problem. If they ever did anything, it'd be my fault, and while they were technically serving under Diablo, blaming him would get me nowhere. I'd even told Elmesia I'd take care of them, so I couldn't just rescind my offer. I wanted to go back in time and punch my dull-minded self, but that's what I get for being so thoughtless, I suppose. It'd be a lot harder to manage these guys than all of human society, and the thought made me let out a surreptitious, depressed sigh. Then Ramirez, Dino, and Valdora got to their feet, as if waiting for Guy to wrap up. You know, we feel kinda in the way here, so we'll let you all take care of the rest, okay? Yeah. I've got some important work to do. Vesta's waiting for me and stuff, so I'll catch you later, Guy. Indeed. And in that case, I will go back to my dungeon guardian duties. Ah, a dragon's work is never done. Qua ha ha ha. They worked as a well-practiced, synchronized team, clearly trying their best to get the hell out of Dodge. Dino, in particular, was so eager to not get yelled at any longer that he brought up his totally non-existent work ethic. Huh? Work? You? That joke's not even funny. Guy didn't overlook that, either, making the obvious comment. But Ramirez was ready with a retort. No, he's tellin' the truth. Dino's my assistant now. I'm serious. Guy's eyebrows arched in surprise. He wasn't about to believe anything Dino said, but if Ramirez backed him up, he'd have no choice. Dino is working. What foul magic did you cast upon him, Rimuru? His amazement was now pointed my way. It was a tough question to answer. I don't know. But in our nation, the rule is that you gotta sing for your supper, and I'm just having him follow that. There's no spells involved. If I had a spell like that, I'd have a lot less trouble. It must have come out in my tone of voice, because Guy didn't push the topic any further. So Ramirez and her two cohorts scurried out of the chamber. They had just finished the tea and snacks Shuna set out for them, so their timing was impeccable. I'd expect nothing less from them. Fine, then, Guy muttered. I've given my complaints to Dino. Hopefully, he'll try to bring me some useful information for a change. Again, I really wished he wouldn't muse like that when I was in the same damn room. Being so blatantly alerted about spies in my midst kinda made things hard to deal with, not that I could tell Guy to knock it off. Might as well look on the bright side, though. It sure beat probing each other out under the table. So I changed the topic. Great. So did you come all the way here just to ask about Testarossa and the other primal demons? If that was all, Guy would have been heading home by now. But he wasn't, so there must have been something else. I really didn't want yet more problems to deal with, but we wouldn't be getting anywhere unless I asked. That was on my mind, yes, but I have another question. Guy reclined in his seat, looking at the rest of us before settling upon Leon. I just had an encounter with a group that called themselves the Moderate Jesters. Oh? That's the group you had dealings with, isn't it? Guy asked Leon. It is, Leon replied with a nod. Hang on. He just casually confirmed Guy's suspicions, but that was pretty damn important. Wait, so did you see Yuki, too? I asked Guy. Not long ago, I ordered CI to examine the Free Guild headquarters and its regional branches. I was pretty sure our encounter yesterday wasn't planned by Yuki, so I figured he'd pop back to his own headquarters. I doubted he'd make much of a public presence, so I had CI's forces stake out likely guild sites, keeping an eye out for disguises or stand-ins. For the time being, I hadn't heard anything, but I never thought Yuki would run into Guy instead. So are you connected to Yuki, then? I pressed. Huh? Don't be silly, Guy replied. They were trying to flee to the east, so I spanked them a little for it. I suspected Guy and Yuki might be in cahoots, but I guess not. That was a relief, but it still didn't indicate what Guy was after. You didn't kill him? Leon asked. I was curious about that myself, but moreover, was he saying that Yuki abandoned his positions in the west and tried to flee eastward? He never struck me as the type to shy away from making big moves, but this was an incredibly bold decision, even for him. Too bad he was unlucky enough to draw Guy's ire. If he spanked him, I assumed murder wasn't on the menu, but he sure must have put him through the ringer. Not that I felt bad for Yuki, he deserved it. No, I didn't kill him. At first, I thought I'd capture him and make you owe me a favor, but things changed. Guy proceeded to tell me how his encounter with Yuki turned out. Now we had a clearer, albeit still vague, idea of what he was up to when nobody was looking. He was the main employer and boss of the Moderate Jesters, proving Raphael correct. So we went over everything, good or bad, Yuki had been up to. 1. He developed the Society of Adventurers into the Free Guild. 2. He built connections to the Rotzos, de facto rulers of the council, and handled their dirty work, including being an intermediary to Leon. 3. He backed Clayman as a demon lord, even controlling him behind the curtain. 4. He crushed the Echidna Club, the shady group that presided over the Eastern Empire underground, and created the secret Cerberus Society to replace it. In public society, he created the Free Guild. Outside of it, he was an organized crime leader. The Echidna Club was news to me, but it sounded like a pretty gigantic presence in the underworld, and that info came from Leon, so there was no doubting it. The Orthra's slave market that Masayuki broke up, by the way, was an affiliate of Cerberus, so I'm sure Yuki had a hand in that, too. The pattern seemed to indicate that Yuki had a knack for crushing existing organizations and taking them over for himself. Sounded easy enough, but it was incredibly difficult to put into practice, and he had done it all in under 10 years. Talented wasn't the half of it. Calling him a genius was no exaggeration at all. Still, I didn't like how overly self-confident he was. No matter how talented you were, failing to accurately judge your opponent's strength was a serious mistake. One look at Guy should have taught you how much trouble he was. Yuki managed to escape this time, though, if I had to say one positive thing about him, it was his incredible good luck. Learning he was alive left me with mixed feelings. We shared a homeland, after all, and I didn't actually want him to die or anything. But at the same time, I couldn't just let everything he did slide. He pretended to be this nice, affable guy, but meanwhile, he was using the Rotso family and even Leon as his pawns. That, and he sent the Moderate Jesters to drag Hinata and me into battle. Even worse, this was all for the sake of world conquest, a dream too childish for me to laugh at. So why did Guy let Yuki go? I decided to ask him point blank. If he answered me, then hey, win-win. All right. So if you let him escape, then what could possibly be your plan? Oh, it's all just a game, he deadpanned. I wasn't sure what game meant in this context, but he ignored my suspicions. As he put it, the Eastern Empire was bound to make a move soon, and Yuki had offered to go in and sabotage things if Guy spared his life. So it sounds like you don't want the Western nations to fall. But why? I'd been wondering about that. But Guy's reply was even more surprising. Because it's my job to manage them so they don't fall. I mean, I don't want too many humans around there, but regardless, my final mission, is to put all of humanity under the rule of the demon lords. That, I surmised, was the game Guy alluded to. And once his rule was complete, so was his victory. Well, I mean, why'd you have Lady Misery try to wreck the council, then? If she killed all the councillors just when the East was on the attack, the Western nations would be at a deadly disadvantage. None of the countries could work with one another. The battle could have been over before it began. Guy chuckled at the question. Just Misery is fine, he casually replied. I gave Misery permission to unite the West into a single entity. What was that supposed to mean? Understood. He presumably wanted to spread terror across the West, making it easier for you to rule over it. So is it like this, then? A demon lord massacres the council, everyone's panic-stricken, then I lend a hand and they all eagerly agree to my protection? If a few people had to die for it, then oh well? Understood. Presumably so, I see. It was pretty extreme, a bit like starting a fire so you could be the hero who put it out, and I felt Guy and Misery had different motives, but they did it all for me. Or not. Maybe he just wanted to take advantage of me, so I could manage the Western nations for him. What he didn't know was that I had already made some deep inroads in the West. I didn't think quite this far ahead, but with Testaross's support, I pretty much had the council in my pocket. But Guy wasn't out to destroy humanity. Quite the opposite. He wanted to appropriately manage those fools so they didn't kill themselves off. And if I took up that job, Guy couldn't ask for anything better. It was exactly what he wanted, really. One thing I definitely understood about Guy now, he was way too sketchy with his work. I had to admit, I could probably handle this better than him. Okay. So you don't have any issue with me basically having total control of the West? I said. Not at all. As long as some fool doesn't get cocky and kick up a fuss, I have no complaints. Great, then. This was turning into a much shorter process than I expected, but if that was how the chips fell, then I might as well take over Western nations management. In that case, I'll be glad to accept. And since I am, I'd appreciate it if you could quit messing around in northern Englesia. From what others had told me, one of Guy's underlings enjoyed causing havoc up north on regular occasions. Raziel was the guardian up there, and Shion had just done a fine job killing him, unfortunately. Given the state of emergency, Elmesia of Thalion had sent a team of Magus Knights over to keep the peace. It wouldn't be right of me to thank her for that, exactly, but it'd be incredibly selfish to tap her armies again for the same thing. If I was gonna rule the Western nations, it was up to me to defend them, and that meant a lot of money I'd have to waste on a defense budget. I really wanted to avoid that. The world's not exactly crawling with talent like Raziel. No need to worry about that, we can leave such trivial matters to Testarossa as well. Diablo smirked at me, banishing all my concerns. But before I could ask if that was really okay. Right, yeah. The guys up there could use a breather anyway, I'm sure. Let 'em all do what they like. Even Guy agreed with Diablo. It made me think about just how inscrutable the thoughts of demons were to normies like me. So as Diablo suggested, I let Testarossa handle all the demon activity in Englesia. I had a pledge from Guy, and I figured that would stave off any conflict before it started. I was thus now the ruler of the West, but we still had a few loose ends to tie up. So, Rimuru, can I leave you responsible for the Eastern Empire? Luminous's question reminded me of that other issue. Well, if you're saying that the Empire's making a move, do you mean militarily speaking? I wanted to ask, just in case. Guy gave me a nod, like this was the dumbest question in the world. Lately, Hinata explained to me, the Empire's been conducting a rash of military exercises. It was brought up in the council, too. If she was aware of it, she must have already come up with some countermeasures. I didn't think the Empire was going to stage an army invasion. The 3 routes they had to choose from were all forbiddingly difficult to conquer, so it didn't seem like a realistic choice. There was too little merit in the Empire aiming for the West, unless they didn't care about the casualties. Staging an invasion, at the end of it, is meant to be a profitable enterprise. You don't have food, or resources, or a place to live, so you strike at other nations that do, but if you solve your own problems, there's no longer any need to risk bloodshed. Of course, it's never that easy to solve problems. There's no reason for a wealthy nation to bust their hump over a poor one, so if they're asked to, there's the seed of a conflict right there. That's why wealthy nations keep a standing army to defend themselves. It's important to make would-be invaders think they won't have an easy victory. Nobody's going to dirty their hands with war if the profit isn't worth shedding blood over. But why else would people want to go into war? Understood. Because of a firm belief they will win no matter what. That's all I can think of. I controlled the council, so I couldn't imagine one of its members betraying me. Maybe, then, the East developed some amazing new military tech or a battle strategy like none before, or some other ace in the hole. Hinata? I know. You asked me about the structure of the Dwarven Kingdom earlier? Well, it's not impossible to march an army through it. She wasted no time picking up on my intentions. The Dwarven Kingdom was neutral, and I doubted Garzel would give them permission to pass, but that was the safest route an army could take to invade the West. In fact, I dismissed the notion at first, but is there a chance they'd attack Dworgen first? Hee. How shameless. You asked me to investigate that question because you thought so, didn't you? Oh, was Hinata praising me? I'd only thought of that just now, but well, let's roll with it. You knew, huh? Well, if the possibility's there, let's tackle it, I say. I resolved to contact Garzel and work out a plan. It'd be much more than an annoyance if it happened, a real disaster, in fact, but it wasn't something we could wish away. With Tempest now holding the Council's military power, it was our duty to bear the full brunt of combat. If you weren't around, it would have been Granville and Luminous facing off against the Empire. Guy sounded like it was none of his business now. But the size of the Empire's force was a question mark, and in that scenario, it'd be the Rotso's combined armies, Hinata's Crusaders, and the Lubelia's standing force fending it off. No matter who won, it didn't matter to Guy. So why did he take Yuki's offer, then? I could only surmise that he had his own motivations. I suppose that strange word, game, was the key to understanding that, but it's not like he'd give me a straight answer. I'll provide support, too, but don't expect me to take orders from you, all right? Said Hinata. I could understand that. Hinata had no reason to oversee the front lines herself. I'm still not exactly sure if this'll turn into war, but we'll figure out something. Hinata, you guys should prepare in case the Empire completely bamboozles us with their invasion. Roger that. And we'll take care of any of their agents disguised as merchants. Her smile was a little frightening as she accepted. But this was fine. Now I didn't have to ask for anything. Rimuru, a troubled-sounding Luminous, said, if you are defeated, it will come down to us to fight. I advise you to do whatever it takes for that not to happen. I could believe it. Between accounting for casualties and repairing their destroyed cathedral, Luminous was in no shape to focus on a war. I should have been happy I got Hinata's support, at least. My main concern is whether I can get Yuki's cooperation. Our feud went down to the root. He had the Kingdom of Farmus do his bidding, which led to all sorts of horrors for Shion and her force. He was controlling Clayman, and if you turn back the clock enough, he was even involved with the uprising led by Geld in his Orc Lord days. If you asked someone to forget it all and let bygones be bygones, well, that wasn't how people worked. Are you worried about us, Surimaru? Shion could be sharp like that sometimes. I wouldn't even say anything, and she could see exactly what conflicted me. Well, kind of. I'm not about to start trusting him out of the blue given everything that's happened so far. In fact, I couldn't trust him at all. And if a war suddenly broke out, there was nothing you could count on less than an ally you couldn't trust. Now that Yuki's gone, I've got no idea how he'll move, Guy carelessly added. Not that I care, really. If you can handle all that for me, then perfect. Hearing that made me decide, finally, that counting Yuki as part of my force was hard to picture. Then I will ask CI to examine his movements, and only examine them, said Diablo, if you could, please. That's enough about Yuki for now. We'd have to see how things went. At the very least, I wasn't gonna get all buddy-buddy without an apology. We were running a country here, so depending on what he did, I could imagine us patching things up, but I wasn't broad-minded enough to forgive him in exchange for nothing. Are you good with this, Shion? Of course. I'll crush him if he opposes you, and if he reconciles with you, I'll forgive him after I punch him out. Just don't kill him when you do, I said to myself. Although if she did, I'd chalk that up as an accident. Yuki didn't want to kill me or Shion, so I could guarantee it wasn't on purpose. So we shunted the question of Yuki to the future. Guy had one more thing on his mind, the main thing, in fact. It was about the hero Chloe. I know that Granville's mission was to unlock the thing Luminous here was trying so hard to hide in her domain. I was watching to make sure that thing didn't go out of control, but Diablo was all just leave it to Rimuru, so he decided to travel here to see how things were turning out. When did Diablo say that anyway? Then I remembered, Diablo did run off for a bit during battle, didn't he? He must have been doing a little unauthorized negotiating. I can't say I liked that, but it turned out to be a masterstroke. If Guy had gotten involved in that fight, there's no telling what could have happened. We were talking about that a moment ago, actually, but now that you're here, why don't I summarize things for you? I decided to take control of the summit and go over everything one more time. I didn't think Leon and Luminous would say anything I didn't want them to, but still, just in case. The really important stuff, Chloe's time travel, the countless loops she's made, that was all best left hidden. Besides, as long as I didn't tell Guy, he had no way of knowing. So we defeated the Berserk Chronoa, and that settled things for good. My story thus wound up pinning most of the blame on Chronoa, but I only did it to protect Chloe. If I started talking about how Chloe was Chronoa, it'd just make things more complicated, so I wanted to keep that a secret from Guy. All right. Quite a tough battle, it sounds like. So can I ask you something? Sure. Anything. That girl over there's clearly a hero. Mind giving me an explanation? Oof. I tried to hide that, but Guy was just too smart to fool. Well, in that battle, a hidden force within this girl woke up. I attempted a believable, if wholly absurd, story. You liar. So much for that. It certainly made for a classic fantasy, discovering your powers in the heat of battle, but the excuse had no chance of working. To tell the truth. Chloe here, Leon said as I hesitated, is the exact person I spent years searching for with my targeted summoning. She happened to be there for some reason, and thanks to that, we were all saved. I had no idea where Leon was going with this, but if I wanted to slog through it, I had no choice but to follow his lead. Indeed, Luminous said before I could speak up. I was quite surprised as well, but this Chloe turned out to be the most suitable sealing vessel. Now she was adding her own take to the story. So it's up to me to tie it all together, then? Sealing vessel? A quizzical Guy asked, looking right at me. That's what I wanna ask, I thought, but by now, there was no chance we could be honest with him. I had to keep going. Yeah. The way Leon described it, she's got this unique ability to steal any target's power and seal it within herself. I could hardly believe it, but we've got the results right before our eyes, so I kinda have to. How was that, huh? And I even passed it to Leon. It was his turn to take over. But Luminous was quicker. You are absolutely correct. Now, I am afraid to say, I have lost my most prized of hidden weapons, but I suppose I can accept that over an uncontrollable death machine on the rampage. She seemed embittered. Truly embittered. It was an A-list performance. I almost wanted to applaud her. Now Leon just had to wrap it up. I can see why. Guy, there are many powerful forces in the world, yourself included. I wanted to protect Chloe against these advancing threats, but I never thought she'd use her force right after I met her. I am just as unlucky here. Leon sighed. His depression hardly seemed contrived at all. If Luminous won the Best Actress award, he'd be sharing the stage as Best Actor. Regardless, we now had a coherent story. Chloe sealed Chronoa away, and thus she had obtained the powers of a hero. You three aren't trying to trick me, are you? Not at all, I retorted. You've always been too doubtful of others, Leon agreed. Indeed, said Luminous. Stop fretting over trivialities. We all swarmed upon Guy's doubt in unison. Such instant teamwork was the result, I suppose, of how much we all cherished Chloe. But you see she's obtained hero powers, don't you? Are you just going to leave her be? Guy asked. Leon rose from his seat. Don't worry, Guy added with a laugh, I'm not going to touch her. Fine, then. If you were ever to threaten her, you'll have to address me first. Leon sat back down. Things were tense in the chamber now, but Guy wasn't being the least bit hostile. I, too, was worried Leon might try something unadvised, but he was surprisingly calm. That reassured me well enough, but the next moment, I was chilled to the bone. A sword glinted. In Guy's hand was a long sword, produced from parts unknown, and it was now heading straight for the back of Chloe's neck. The speed of his technique was nothing short of supernatural. My perception speed, enhanced 1,000,000 times over, told me I'd still never make it in time, and the same was true for Leon and Luminous. Our faces twisted in horror as we tried to turn away from the tragedy about to unfold. But, the next moment, a clear tone echoed across the chamber. Question mark. The little Chloe had now grown and was wielding a sword nobody saw her unsheathed to take the force of Guy's blow. Her very clothing had transformed to that of the hero, she had mastered the use of her